The young and the restless spoilers, the gathering storm, Victor's instincts, Nikki's capture, and the return of Ian Ward. Victor Newman stood by the grand window of Newman Ranch, his steely gaze fixed on the sprawling estate as dusk settled over Genoa City. The air was heavy with unease, the kind that Victor couldn't ignore. He had lived through enough betrayals, schemes, and tragedies to know when danger was lurking just beyond the horizon. Sharon Newman and Tessa Porter had vanished without a trace. No ransom demands had been made, no evidence of foul play discovered, but Victor knew better than to wait for the obvious. His instincts told him this wasn't a coincidence, it was a calculated move by someone with power and malice. Jordan Wilde, Victor muttered under his breath, his fists clenching. The name carried venom, a shadow from the past that had re-emerged to haunt Genoa City. Jordan had escaped from prison, a feat that should have been impossible. Victor's mind churned with possibilities. Jordan wasn't working alone, he couldn't be. Kidnapping two women simultaneously was a feat requiring resources, strategy, and allies. Victor turned to his family, his voice a commanding growl. Listen to me, all of you. No one goes anywhere alone. Not to the office, not to the store, nowhere. You will each have a security detail at all times. This is not a request. It's an order. A family divided on danger. The Newman family listened intently, though their reactions varied. Nikki Newman, Victor's wife, was notably skeptical. She had lived through countless threats, kidnappings, and schemes during her time with Victor. To her, this was just another chapter in their chaotic lives. Victor, Nikki said with a soft laugh, you're being paranoid. You've got half the ranch surrounded by guards. No one is going to touch us. Victor's gaze sharpened. Don't underestimate our enemies, Nikki. That's exactly how they win. Despite Victor's warnings, Nikki dismissed the idea that she was in any real danger. She had grown accustomed to living under constant security and believed herself untouchable, a perception that would soon prove devastatingly false. The return of Ian Ward, unbeknownst to Nikki, a familiar and sinister figure, had entered the picture. Ian Ward, a master manipulator and cult leader who had haunted the Newman family for years, had aligned himself with Jordan. Ian's charm and cunning made him a dangerous ally, capable of infiltrating even the most secure environments. Ian's plan was as bold as it was brilliant. Disguising himself as one of Nikki's security detail, he blended seamlessly into her protective entourage. For days, he observed her routine, noting her movements, preferences, and vulnerabilities. His patience paid off when he saw his opportunity. Nikki's capture one evening, as Nikki prepared to leave an event at the Genoa City Art Museum, Ian struck. Posing as her driver, he opened the door to what appeared to be a standard Newman Enterprises vehicle. Nikki, assuming all was well, climbed in without a second thought. It wasn't until the locks clicked and the vehicle sped off in an unfamiliar direction that Nikki realized something was wrong. She turned to Ian, confusion and fear flashing across her face. "Who are you?" she demanded. Ian smirked, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Just an old friend, Nikki." Before she could scream, Ian produced a syringe and injected her with a powerful sedative. Nikki's world blurred, her body slumping against the seat as consciousness slipped away. A chilling transformation. When Nikki awoke, she found herself in a dimly lit room that reeked of antiseptic. She was dressed in hospital scrubs, her wrists and ankles strapped to a gurney. Panic surged through her as she struggled against the restraints. Ian appeared, his demeanor calm and almost polite. "Good evening, Nikki. I trust you're feeling well, let's just say, subdued. What do you want?" Nikki spat, her voice trembling. Ian leaned closer, his voice a menacing whisper. "Your leverage, my dear. A piece in a much larger game. And believe me, the Newmans will pay dearly to get you back." Victor's worst fears realized back at Newman Ranch, Victor's unease turned into full-blown dread when Nikki didn't return home. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and her security detail had vanished. Victor's head of security, clearly panicked, reported that one of the guards had been an imposter. Victor's temper flared. How the hell did this happen under your watch? Find her. Find her now. The room was silent, the weight of Victor's fury pressing on everyone present. But beneath his anger was a deep fear. Nikki's disappearance was no random act, it was personal. Victor knew that whoever had taken her was targeting him, aiming to strike at the very heart of his family. The hunt begins. Victor wasted no time mobilizing his resources. Private investigators, tech experts, and trusted allies were brought in to track Nikki's movements. He reviewed every detail of her day, searching for clues. Meanwhile, Jordan and Ian celebrated their success. With Nikki in their grasp, they believed they had the leverage to bring Victor Newman to his knees. But Victor was not a man who succumbed to threats. If anything, Nikki's capture had awakened the relentless force that had built an empire, and he would stop at nothing to bring her back. The ticking clock, the race against time, had begun. Victor's instincts had been right from the start. Danger was closer than anyone had imagined. But with Ian and Jordan working in tandem, the Newman family faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. As the shadows closed in around Genoa City, the question remained, would Victor's swift action and unyielding determination be enough to save Nikki? Or would Ian's calculated plan succeed in dismantling the Newman dynasty piece by piece? One thing was certain, the battle for Nikki's life and the fate of the Newmans had only just begun. The third victim, a city in shock, a family in crisis. The news of Nikki Newman's abduction sent shockwaves through Genoa City. What had begun as a mysterious disappearance of Sharon Newman and Tessa Porter had escalated into a full-blown crisis. The once secure world of the Newmans was now crumbling, their family matriarch snatched in an act so brazen that it left even the most hardened residents of the city in stunned disbelief. The question on everyone's lips was the same: who would dare? The kidnappers operated with chilling confidence, showing no fear of the Newman family's power or Victor Newman's influence. Their actions seemed calculated, almost personal, as if they were sending a message, not just to the Newmans, but to the entire city. No one was safe. Victor's fury and caution. Victor Newman, known for his unrelenting strength and ruthless precision, was furious. Yet beneath the fiery anger was a simmering fear. Nikki, the love of his life, had been taken, and he was powerless to reach her. His instincts screamed for vengeance, but his pragmatism held him back. If they could take Nikki, Victor muttered under his breath, pacing his office, then they can come for me too. For the first time in years, Victor felt vulnerable. He tightened his security detail, surrounding himself with bodyguards even within the Newman Tower. His fury was tempered by a grim understanding: if he were captured as well, the Newman Empire would be left leaderless and vulnerable. Despite the chaos, Victor refused to let despair take hold. He began orchestrating a citywide search for Nikki, Sharon, and Tessa, deploying private investigators, police contacts, and even reaching out to rivals for information. No stone will be left unturned, he vowed, his voice resolute. I will bring her back. A nightmare underground in a dark, damp cellar somewhere outside Genoa City, Nikki Newman awoke to the harsh reality of her captivity. Her wrists were bound, her head ached from the sedative, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew. Across the room, Sharon and Tessa huddled together, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Sharon, Nikki whispered, her voice cracking. Are you okay? Sharon nodded weakly, her eyes brimming with tears. We're alive. That's all that matters right now. Tessa, ever the optimist despite their dire circumstances, reached out to Nikki. We have to stay strong, she said, though her voice trembled. Someone will come for us. They have to. The three women clung to each other, finding solace in their shared pain. They whispered words of encouragement, tried to stay hopeful, and reminded one another that the Newmans' reach extended far and wide. Yet, deep down, a gnawing fear lingered: what if no one found them in time? The kidnappers' bold confidence, the audacity of the kidnappers, was unsettling. They moved with the kind of confidence that suggested they feared no one, not the Newmans, not the police, not even Victor himself. It was this boldness that unsettled Victor the most. Whoever was behind this was not just acting on impulse, they were sending a message. Ian Ward, cunning and remorseless, sat at the heart of the operation. Alongside him was Jordan Wilde, the escaped convict whose hatred for Genoa City had only deepened during his years behind bars. Together, they formed a dangerous duo, Ian, the manipulative mastermind, and Jordan, the ruthless executor. Jordan grinned as he addressed Ian in their hideout. "Victor Newman can send all the bodyguards he wants," he sneered. "They'll never find us. And even if they do, they won't get out alive." Ian, ever the strategist, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Let them try. The Newmans have always thought themselves untouchable. It's time they learned otherwise." Nikki's desperation back in the cellar, Nikki's composure was slipping. She had always been a pillar of strength for her family, but the terror of her situation was overwhelming. She couldn't stop the tears from falling as she thought of Victor, her children, and the life she might never return to. "Victor will find us," Nikki whispered, more to herself than to Sharon or Tessa. "He always does." Sharon reached out and squeezed Nikki's hand. "We have to believe that. It's all we have." But the hours dragged on, and their hope began to waver. The darkness of the cellar was suffocating, the silence broken only by the occasional footsteps of their captors above. Nikki, Sharon, and Tessa did their best to comfort each other, but the uncertainty of their fate hung over them like a storm cloud. Victor's determination meanwhile, Victor's investigation was intensifying. Clues were scarce, but he refused to let frustration slow him down. Every phone call, every lead, and every tip was pursued with relentless energy. He worked late into the night, his mind racing with possibilities. "This is personal," Victor growled during a meeting with his team. "Ian Ward and Jordan Wilde, they're sending a message. They want us to know they're in control." Nick Newman, Victor's son, stood by his father's side, equally determined. "We'll find them, Dad," Nick said. "We'll bring them all home." Victor nodded, his eyes blazing with resolve. "And when we do, they'll regret the day they crossed the Newman family." A glimmer of hope back in the cellar, Nikki, Sharon, and Tessa clung to the hope that Victor's reach and determination would prevail. They shared stories to pass the time, reminding each other of the lives waiting for them outside. They refused to let despair win, even as exhaustion and fear threatened to consume them. "We'll get out of this," Sharon said softly. "We have to." Nikki nodded, her tears drying as a flicker of her old strength returned. "Victor won't stop until he finds us," she said firmly. "And when he does, those bastards will pay." The clock is ticking. The battle to rescue Nikki, Sharon, and Tessa had become a race against time. Victor's resources were vast, but so were the kidnappers' cunning and boldness. The city watched with bated breath as the Newman family's darkest chapter unfolded. Would Victor's relentless pursuit be enough to save the women he loved? Or would Ian Ward and Jordan Wilde's ruthless plot succeed in breaking the Newmans once and for all? One thing was certain, the fight for survival and justice was far from over.